The alien empire stretched across 1,000 star systems, shining with riches and power. At its heart stood the grand palace of Emperor Tsar, a ruler feared and respected by many worlds. The palace was made of dark stone brought from a dead planet and polished until it reflected the stars. Every corner of the hall carried banners showing the crest of the empire, a dragon breathing fire into the endless sky. To the people of this empire, dragons were not just symbols. They were living creatures tied to the throne itself. A strong emperor always raised a strong dragon, and the empire measured its strength through that bond. On this day, the great hall was crowded with nobles, guards, and advisors. They stood in silence, waiting for the emperor to appear. At the center of the floor lay a circle marked for testing. It was here that the young hatchling of Emperor Tsar would show its first signs of greatness. Every noble wanted to see the fire of the new heir. The heavy doors opened, and Emperor Tsar entered. He wore robes lined with silver scales and carried the weight of authority in every step. Behind him, small claws clicked against the floor. The hatchling followed. It was smaller than the courtiers expected, with scales that were a dull shade instead of the shining colors of its ancestors. The hatchling's wings twitched, unsteady, and its eyes darted nervously across the hall. Tsar stopped before the circle and raised one hand. His voice echoed across the chamber, deep and commanding. "Behold my blood. The hatchling of the imperial line. Today it shall show its first fire." The nobles clapped politely, though whispers passed among them. Some doubted the size of the young dragon. Others questioned its slow movements. Still, all waited to see what the hatchling could do. The test began. A guard placed a block of hard stone in the center of the circle. The hatchling was expected to breathe flame and reduce it to ash, proving its power. The emperor gave a sharp command. "Breathe." The hatchling stepped forward, trembling. Its small chest swelled as it tried to gather strength. Sparks flickered in its throat, but when it opened its mouth, only smoke came out. A weak cough followed, and the stone remained untouched. Laughter broke from some nobles. Others shook their heads in pity. The emperor's face grew dark. Again, he ordered. The hatchling obeyed, straining harder. This time, a faint tongue of fire escaped, but it died almost at once. The flame was too thin, too short, and it failed to even warm the stone. Murmurs filled the hall. The whispers grew louder, carrying doubt and mockery. Emperor Tsar's jaw tightened. He gave the command once more. Again. The hatchling tried with all its strength. Its wings spread awkwardly, and its body shivered from the effort. Still, no flame strong enough came. At last, the hatchling collapsed on the floor, exhausted, its small body trembling with shame. Silence followed for a moment, broken only by the childlike panting of the dragon. Then, from the back of the hall, a noble spoke in a low voice meant to be heard. "The bloodline has weakened." Another added, "A useless hatchling cannot carry the empire." The emperor turned, his eyes burning with anger. He raised his voice so all could hear. "Silence. None may question the blood of the throne." Yet even as he spoke, his gaze fell on the hatchling, lying weak at his feet. In his heart, disappointment grew like a heavy stone. He had dreamed of a dragon fierce and mighty, one that would frighten enemies and inspire allies. What lay before him instead was fragile and unproven. Tsar's voice lowered, harsh and cold. He looked at the hatchling and spoke the word that would echo through the palace. "Useless." The word struck harder than any whip. The hatchling whimpered softly, folding its wings tight against its body. Nobles exchanged glances, some hiding smiles, others watching with unease. To them, if the emperor himself declared the hatchling useless, then the future of the empire was in doubt. From that day, the hatchling was treated with little respect. Trainers gave up quickly, believing their time wasted. Courtiers ignored its presence, focusing instead on their own politics. Even the servants whispered that the emperor's dragon was a failure. The once proud symbol of power became a subject of quiet jokes told in shadowed corners. Still, the hatchling lived, though its spirit grew weaker. It wandered the palace halls, often hungry and lonely. Each step carried the weight of its father's judgment. It wanted to prove itself but did not know how. The fire within it burned strangely, as if twisted out of place, leaving only sparks instead of flame. The emperor, though harsh, was not without pride. He continued his duties across the empire, yet the thought of the weak dragon gnawed at him. His enemies would one day hear of this weakness, and the empire's strength would be questioned. To Tsar, this was unforgivable. But no matter how much he demanded, the hatchling could not change. Thus, the court began to drift toward despair. The nobles whispered of succession challenges. Advisors suggested hiding the hatchling from public view. None dared to speak openly against the emperor, but their doubts spread like fire in dry grass. And so the young dragon, meant to be the glory of the throne, sat forgotten in the shadows of the palace. Its eyes carried sadness, yet deep inside a spark remained unbroken. Somewhere in the endless stars, fate was moving. A meeting was waiting that would change everything. But for now, in the great palace of Emperor Tsar, the hatchling carried only the weight of one cruel word spoken by its father. Useless. Far away from the grand halls of Emperor Tsar, the stars carried ships of many kinds. Some were built for war, some for trade, and some for travel between the countless worlds of the empire. On one quiet morning, a small human ship approached the capital world. It was not large or elegant like the alien vessels of the court. Its frame was scratched from long journeys, its engines hummed unevenly, and its metal skin showed the marks of repairs done by hand. To most nobles, such a ship would seem unworthy of notice. Yet within it traveled people whose skills could surprise even the proudest rulers. The ship docked at a trading station near the capital. Workers swarmed around it, unloading goods and checking records. Among the crew stepped a human named Tamash. He was not tall, not richly dressed, and not skilled in the art of politics. Instead, he carried tools on his belt and grease on his hands. His eyes were calm, and his steps were steady. Tamash was a mechanic, one who had spent his life repairing what others thought broken beyond saving. Most humans in the empire lived as traders, miners, or explorers. They were known for being clever with machines, though many aliens thought them fragile and simple. Tamash did not argue with such views. He preferred to let his work speak for him. When something failed to move, he made it move again. When something failed to shine, he gave it light once more. The trading station where he worked that day was filled with noise. Merchants shouted prices, guards barked orders, and machines whirred endlessly. Tamash moved among them with quiet focus. He repaired a broken engine coil, tightened the wing locks of a shuttle, and replaced a cracked fuel pipe. To him, machines were like puzzles. Each problem had a hidden answer, waiting to be found. While he worked, he overheard voices of aliens speaking nearby. They spoke in hushed tones, but the words carried across the busy floor. "The Emperor's hatchling has failed again," one said. "They say it cannot breathe fire at all," another whispered. "A useless dragon brings shame to the empire," a third added. Tamash paused. He wiped his hands on a cloth and listened more closely. He did not know much about dragons of the Empire, but he knew what it meant when something was called useless. Too many times he had seen broken machines thrown away because people believed they could not be repaired. Too many times he had found that they only needed patience and the right touch. Curiosity stirred within him. He wondered if a living creature could suffer the same way as machines did, carrying parts that did not work together, struggling not because it was weak but because it was misunderstood. Later that day, when his work was done, Tomasz walked through the capital streets. Towers of black stone rose high above, and banners of dragons waved in the wind. He saw the palace in the distance, its walls shining like the surface of a starship. Around him, the people spoke with pride about their emperor, yet he heard the same whispers return again and again. The hatchling was weak. The hatchling was shameful. The hatchling was useless. Tomasz did not join the whispers. He simply thought. His hands itched the way they always did when he sensed a challenge. He wondered what the dragon looked like, how it moved, and whether anyone had truly tried to help it instead of scolding it. By chance, fortune placed Tomasz before the palace gates the next morning. He had been called to repair a set of transport carts used by the imperial guards. While he fixed their engines, a group of courtiers walked past, laughing among themselves. One of them noticed Tomasz at work and sneered. "A human mechanic," the courtier said with disdain. "Perhaps you should try fixing our emperor's hatchling next. It is as broken as these machines." The others laughed, and Tomasz looked up. He did not answer with anger, only with calm curiosity. "A hatchling is not a machine," he said. The courtier smirked. "This one may as well be. It breathes no fire, flies no flight, and brings no honor. Truly, it is useless." The group walked away, still laughing. Tomasz returned to his work, but the words stayed in his mind. That night, when he rested in the small quarters given to visiting workers, he lay awake thinking about the hatchling. He imagined a creature trying with all its strength, yet failing again and again. He imagined how heavy the word useless must feel when spoken by its own father. The next day, while Tomasz was still working in the palace yard, he was summoned unexpectedly. Two guards approached, their armor shining and their faces stern. "You will come with us," one said. Tomasz followed them through wide halls lined with carved pillars. At last, they brought him into a chamber where nobles stood in a circle. At the center, lying on the floor with drooping wings, was the hatchling itself. The courtiers whispered and laughed softly as Tomasz entered. One said, "Let us see if the human can fix this broken beast." Another added, "Perhaps he can turn it into a cart instead of a dragon." Tomasz looked at the hatchling. Its eyes were wide with fear, its scales dull, its small body trembling. He did not laugh. He did not mock. He saw not a failure but a creature carrying weight it could not understand. To him, it looked the same as a machine whose parts were out of order, struggling not because it lacked power but because its strength was trapped. He stepped closer, his voice calm. "May I look at it?" he asked. The courtiers chuckled, waving their hands as if it were a game. "Go on, human. See what your hands can do. We are curious to watch." Tomasz knelt beside the hatchling. He did not touch at first. Instead, he studied its wings, its joints, and the faint glow inside its chest where the fire should gather. He noticed how the wings folded unevenly, how the breathing came in short bursts, and how the spark within flickered without direction. Slowly, carefully, Tomasz reached out and placed a hand near the hatchling's side. His touch was gentle, not forceful. The hatchling shivered but did not pull away. For the first time in its short life, someone looked at it not with anger or disappointment but with patience. The courtiers expected laughter, but silence filled the chamber instead. Tomash was not laughing. He was thinking, and in his calm gaze, the hatchling saw something new. It saw hope. The chamber grew still as Tomash studied the hatchling. The courtiers expected him to fail, yet his calm manner caught their attention. He moved slowly, observing every detail. The hatchling breathed unevenly, its chest rising and falling as if each breath was a battle. Its wings sagged to one side, and its tail dragged weakly across the polished floor. The dull shine of its scales seemed to carry the same sadness found in its eyes. Tomash leaned closer. His fingers traced the edges of the wing joints, not to cause pain, but to understand. The hatchling flinched at first, but when it felt the gentleness of his touch, it relaxed. Tomash noticed the joints were stiff, as if they had grown in the wrong position. The muscles strained each time the hatchling tried to lift its wings, but the angles were misaligned. To him, it looked like the gears of a machine that had been set out of place. He then placed his ear near the hatchling's chest. A faint hum vibrated within, a sound no alien had cared to notice. Tomash listened carefully. The hum reminded him of an energy core in a ship, one that carried power but leaked through cracks instead of flowing where it was needed. The fire within the hatchling was not absent. It was trapped, scattered through its body instead of gathering in one strong source. The courtiers grew restless. "What is the human doing?" one whispered. "Perhaps he thinks the beast has cogs and wires inside," another laughed. Tomash ignored them. He stood slowly, wiping his hands on his cloth. His voice was steady when he spoke. "It is not weak. It is misaligned. Its body carries power, but the power is scattered. The wings strain because they are pulled the wrong way. The fire fails because it does not gather where it should. It is like a machine built well but put together in the wrong order." The courtiers stared at him with confusion. To them, dragons were sacred, not machines to be compared with broken engines. Yet Tomash spoke with quiet certainty. The hatchling raised its head slightly, as if listening. Its small eyes focused on the human. For the first time, it saw someone who did not mock or scold. It saw someone who tried to understand. One noble snorted. "You speak as if you can fix it." Another sneered. "Will you use your tools and turn it into one of your ships?" Tomash did not answer with pride or anger. He only said, "I can try." The nobles laughed again, but a few among them grew silent. They remembered the human's reputation for repairing the unrepairable. If he could make broken ships fly again, perhaps he could do more than they expected. The guards watched closely as Tomash removed a small bag of tools from his belt. He did not take out sharp blades or heavy hammers. Instead, he pulled thin rods, measuring wires, and a simple scanner he had built himself. He knelt once more beside the hatchling. "May I?" Tomash asked softly, his words meant for the dragon rather than the nobles. The hatchling blinked and gave a faint rumble, neither a growl nor a cry. Tomash took it as permission. He began to measure the angles of the wings, noting where the joints locked. He pressed gently against the muscles, feeling how they resisted. Each time the hatchling winced, Tomash adjusted, careful not to cause pain. He spoke quietly as he worked, not to the nobles but to the dragon. "You are not useless. You are strong, but your strength flows the wrong way. I will help you guide it." The courtiers shook their heads, calling him foolish. Yet they watched with uneasy eyes as the hatchling responded. The creature, often afraid of touch, did not pull away from the human's hands. It lay still, listening to his voice, trusting his care. After some time, Tomasz stepped back. He had no grand solution yet, but he had gathered enough to understand. Its wings need support to grow in the right shape, he said. Its chest needs guidance so the fire can gather without leaking. This is not failure. This is imbalance. The chamber filled with murmurs. The word imbalance spread from one noble to another. None of them had ever considered such a thought. To them, the hatchling was either strong or weak, worthy or worthless. A creature of the throne was not supposed to need fixing. The emperor himself was not present that day, but his advisors would carry the news to him. Some feared he would be angered by the human's bold claim. Others wondered if a strange hope had appeared where none existed before. Tomasz packed his tools but did not leave the hatchling without comfort. He placed his hand gently on its head. The hatchling leaned slightly into the touch, a small sign that it had found a friend. As Tomasz walked toward the exit, one of the guards whispered under his breath. "Strange human. He sees what no one else sees." Outside the chamber, the courtiers laughed once more, dismissing him as a dreamer. Yet their voices lacked the strength of before. A seed of doubt had been planted in their minds. Perhaps the hatchling was not useless after all. Perhaps it only needed the right guidance. Tomasz returned to his quarters, his thoughts restless. Machines were simple compared to living creatures, yet he felt the same truth applied. Nothing was truly broken. Things only needed patience, care, and the right understanding. The image of the hatchling stayed with him. Its trembling body, its weak flame, and most of all, its eyes filled with loneliness. That night, Tomasz sat with his tools spread before him. He began to sketch designs on a piece of metal sheet. He drew braces that could support wings, channels that could direct energy, and gentle bands that would not harm but guide. His mind worked late into the night, building plans not for a machine, but for a living dragon who had been cast aside. While the palace slept, Tomasz prepared for what was to come. The hatchling had been called useless. He believed otherwise. He believed it only waited for someone to help it find the strength already hidden within. And in the quiet of that night, beneath the shadow of the emperor's palace, a human mechanic began the first steps toward changing the fate of a dragon and the empire itself. The next morning, Tomasz carried a small box of tools and a bundle of metal pieces shaped carefully by his hands. He walked through the tall corridors of the palace with two guards at his side. The courtiers had laughed when he first spoke of imbalance, but curiosity had overcome their doubt. They wanted to see if the strange human could do more than speak. The chamber of training was wide and bright, with an open ceiling that allowed sunlight to pour in. In the center lay the hatchling. It lifted its head weakly as Tomasz entered. Its wings drooped as always, its scales dull, yet its eyes showed a faint light of recognition. It remembered the gentle touch and the quiet voice of the man who had not mocked it. The courtiers gathered around the circle. Some whispered, expecting failure. Others leaned forward, unwilling to admit their growing interest. One noble muttered, "He will waste his time. The hatchling cannot be fixed." Another replied, "Let him try. At least it will be amusing." Tomasz ignored them. He placed his box on the floor and knelt beside the hatchling. He spoke softly, his words for the dragon alone. "Today we will make a small change. Not to force you, but to guide you. Will you let me?" The hatchling gave a faint rumble, not quite a growl but not a cry. Tomasz smiled. He took this as a yes. From the box, he lifted two curved braces made of light metal. They were shaped to fit along the edges of the wings without piercing or harming. Small joints allowed them to move as the dragon moved, offering support without locking the muscles. Tomasz had built them during the night, shaping the metal by hand until the design felt right. The courtiers whispered louder when they saw the strange devices. "He brings human tricks," one said. "Does he think toys will make the hatchling strong?" Tomasz fastened the braces carefully, speaking calmly to the dragon the entire time. The hatchling twitched, but did not fight. Slowly, the support settled into place, holding the wings straighter than before. Tomasz stepped back and nodded. "Now try to lift them." The hatchling looked uncertain. For a moment, it hesitated. Then, with effort, it spread its wings. The braces guided the joints into the right angle. The muscles strained, but this time they held. The wings lifted higher than ever before, stretching wider, catching the sunlight. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The hatchling flapped once, awkwardly, but it remained balanced. The movement stirred dust across the floor, proof that the wings carried more power than anyone believed. A noble shouted, "Impossible." Another whispered, "It moved." Tomasz gave a small smile. "Not impossible. Only guided." The hatchling looked at its wings, eyes wide. For the first time in its young life, it felt the air beneath them. It let out a sound that was half rumble, half chirp, a voice of joy no one in the court had ever heard. Tomasz was not finished. He opened the box again and brought out a band of thin crystal metal, shaped like a loop. Strange lines glowed faintly across it, channels designed to direct energy. Tomasz held it up for the dragon to see. "This will help your fire. Not to give you flame, but to gather what is already inside you." The courtiers laughed again. "Now he wishes to light the beast with rings and trinkets." Tomasz did not answer them. He knelt once more and gently placed the band around the hatchling's chest, just above the place where its fire spark glowed. The band hummed as it connected with the creature's natural energy, guiding the scattered sparks toward the center. The hatchling shivered as the warmth gathered, stronger and steadier than before. "Breathe," Tomasz said softly. The hatchling opened its mouth. For a moment, only smoke escaped as usual. But then, a thin stream of flame burst forth, longer than any it had ever produced. It was not yet powerful enough to burn stone, but it was fire. Real fire. The courtiers gasped louder than before. Some stepped back in shock. The nobles who had laughed now stared in silence. The hatchling blinked at the flame in surprise, then tried again. Another stream of fire shot out, brighter this time. The young dragon's body trembled, but it no longer collapsed. Its wings spread proudly, its chest glowed with heat, and for the first time, it felt strength within itself. Tomasz placed a hand on its neck and spoke with quiet pride. "You see. You are not useless. You only needed help to find your path." The courtiers began to argue among themselves. "It is a trick," one shouted. "The human hides his own fire within the band." Another replied, "No, it came from the hatchling. I saw it with my own eyes." The chamber filled with voices, disbelief fighting against wonder. The guards who stood watch remained silent, yet their eyes followed Tomasz with respect. They had seen many trainers work with dragons before, but none had shown such patience or such results in so little time. The hatchling lowered its head beside Tomasz, pressing against him gently. It no longer trembled with fear. For the first time, it trusted someone. For the first time, it believed it was not broken. Tomasz packed his tools but left the braces and the band in place. He turned to the nobles, his voice calm but firm. This is only the beginning. With care, with training, it will grow strong. Not because of me, but because the strength is already inside it. The nobles had no answer. Some glared in anger at being proven wrong. Others looked uneasy, realizing that their laughter had been foolish. A few, though silent, felt respect for the human who had done what none of them could. When Tomasz left the chamber, whispers followed him. Some mocked him still, calling his work tricks. Others whispered of hope, wondering if the hatchling might yet become a true dragon of the throne. But for Tomasz, none of that mattered. As he walked down the palace hall, his thoughts remained on the young dragon. He had seen the fire, weak but real, and he knew it could grow. Machines had taught him long ago that nothing was beyond saving. Now, a dragon had reminded him of that truth once more. In the chamber behind him, the hatchling curled its wings around its body. It closed its eyes, feeling warmth in its chest that had never been there before. For the first time in its short life, it dreamed not of failure, but of flight and flame. And in the halls of the palace, where whispers of shame had filled the air, a new whisper began to spread. The useless hatchling had breathed fire. The palace grounds were quiet at dawn. The courtyards, usually filled with guards drilling in perfect lines, were still in shadow. Only a few servants moved about, carrying buckets of water or sweeping dust from the stone paths. It was here, away from the crowded courts and whispering nobles, that Tomasz chose to train the hatchling. The young dragon stood before him, wings held straighter by the braces, chest glowing faintly with the band of guiding crystal. It looked uncertain, shifting from one claw to the other. The memory of failure still weighed on it, but the small success of fire the day before had planted a seed of courage. Tomasz crouched down, looking into the creature's eyes. His voice was steady and kind. We will go slowly. One step at a time. You do not need to be great today. You only need to try. The hatchling gave a soft rumble, almost like agreement. Tomasz began with simple exercises. He asked the hatchling to stretch its wings, holding them open as long as possible. The braces kept the joints from folding the wrong way, but the muscles were weak from lack of proper use. The dragon trembled, struggling to keep its wings high. Tomasz encouraged gently. Hold them. Just a little longer. Good. When the hatchling finally dropped them, exhausted, he praised it warmly. That was strong. Better than yesterday. The creature blinked, surprised at the praise. It had grown used to scolding voices, never kind ones. Tomasz's words gave it strength to try again. Next came balance. Tomasz placed stones on the ground, forming a path. He guided the hatchling to walk across them, lifting its claws carefully instead of dragging. The courtiers who came to watch laughed at first. He trains it like a child, one scoffed. Yet their laughter faded when they saw the hatchling steady itself and cross the stones without stumbling. The task seemed small, but to the dragon it was victory. When it was time to practice fire, Tomasz adjusted the band of crystal around its chest. He explained softly, your spark is strong. It only needs direction. Breathe deep, let it gather, then release. The hatchling inhaled, chest glowing brighter. A burst of flame shot out, stronger than the day before. It startled itself, coughing smoke, but Tomasz clapped his hands with a smile. Good. That is the way. Again. The courtiers, once so quick to mock, began to watch more carefully. They could not deny the fire was growing. Days turned into weeks, and each morning Tomasz trained the dragon with patience. He never pushed too hard, never demanded more than it could give. If the hatchling failed, he did not shout. He simply adjusted, explained, and tried again. Each small success built confidence. The dragon grew stronger, its wings lifting higher, its flame burning brighter. More importantly, it grew braver. No longer did it cower when nobles entered. No longer did it hang its head in shame. It began to stand taller, eyes alert, chest glowing with quiet pride. One afternoon, Tomasz introduced a new exercise. He had built a wooden frame with targets placed at different heights. He guided the hatchling to breathe fire at each one. The first shot missed, the second burned only the edge, but by the fifth try the flame struck true. The young dragon let out a roar of triumph, echoing through the courtyard. Servants stopped to stare. Guards lowered their weapons in surprise. Even the courtiers who had mocked now whispered among themselves. "It learns," one admitted quietly. Another added, "Perhaps the human is not a fool after all." But not everyone welcomed the change. Some nobles feared that if the hatchling grew strong, their chance to challenge the throne would vanish. They whispered plans in shadowed halls, speaking of ways to discredit the human and his strange methods. Yet for now, they could only watch as the hatchling grew under his care. Through it all, Tomasz remained calm. He did not seek power or praise. He worked as he always had, fixing what others abandoned. To him, the dragon was not a symbol or a tool. It was a living creature that deserved patience and respect. At night, after training, the hatchling often followed Tomasz to his quarters. It curled near the door, resting while he polished his tools. Sometimes Tomasz spoke aloud, not to teach but to share his thoughts. "You are stronger each day. Do you know that? Soon you will fly. Not today, but soon." The dragon listened, eyes half closed, comforted by the steady voice. For the first time in its life, it felt safe. One evening, when the sun set behind the palace towers, Emperor Tsar himself came to the courtyard. The courtiers bowed as he entered, their eyes sharp with curiosity. Tomasz stood at the dragon's side, calm but respectful. The emperor's gaze was cold as it fell upon the hatchling. "Show me," he commanded. The dragon trembled, but Tomasz whispered, "Breathe as we practiced. You can do this." The hatchling drew in a deep breath. The crystal band glowed, guiding the energy. A stream of fire burst forth, longer and brighter than ever before. It struck the target dead center, burning it to ash. The courtyard erupted in gasps. Even Emperor Tsar's stern face shifted, if only slightly. His eyes narrowed, not with anger but with thought. He did not speak praise, yet he could not deny what he had seen. The hatchling lowered its head, waiting for judgment. Tomasz rested a hand on its neck. "Well done," he whispered. The emperor turned sharply and left without a word. The courtiers murmured, confused by his silence. But Tomasz understood. Tsar would not admit it openly, not yet, but his disappointment had been shaken. The dragon he had called useless was no longer without hope. That night, the hatchling curled beside Tomasz's quarters again. Its breathing was steady, its body stronger, its eyes brighter. In the quiet of the palace, Tomasz polished his tools and prepared for the next day. Training was far from over, but each step forward proved the truth he had always believed. Nothing was useless. Nothing was beyond saving. And as the stars shone above the empire, the bond between the human mechanic and the dragon hatchling grew, unseen by most but destined to change everything. The palace rang with the sound of trumpets, calling nobles, guards, and citizens to gather in the grand arena. It was a wide circle of black stone, built for ceremonies that displayed the power of the throne. High walls surrounded the arena, and banners of dragons fluttered in the wind. On this day, the emperor himself had called for a public trial. The hatchling would show its worth before all, or be cast aside forever. The stands filled quickly. Nobles in shining robes sat closest to the emperor's throne, while merchants and common folk filled the upper levels. Their voices rose in waves of excitement and doubt. Many had heard whispers of the human mechanic and his strange training, but few believed them. Most expected to see failure, a final embarrassment for the imperial bloodline. Emperor Tsar entered with heavy steps, his presence commanding silence. He sat upon a high seat carved from obsidian, his gaze sharp as a blade. At his side stood his advisors, their expressions unreadable. In the center of the arena, guards brought the hatchling forward. Its wings held straighter now, its chest glowed faintly, but its eyes darted nervously at the endless crowd. From another gate, Tamash walked into the arena. He carried no weapon, only his tool belt and the calm expression he always wore. The crowd murmured in surprise. A human had never stood in the imperial trial ground before. Some nobles scoffed. He dares stand with the dragon. Others whispered with unease. The emperor raised his hand. His voice thundered across the arena. Today, the hatchling of the throne will prove its fire. Before my people and before the stars, it shall rise or it shall fall. Begin. The guards placed a tall pillar of stone in the center. Its surface was marked with deep carvings, a target meant to withstand flame. The hatchling stared at it, trembling. The weight of so many eyes pressed down upon it, heavier than any chain. Tamash stepped close and placed a hand on the dragon's neck. His voice was low but steady. You have done this before. Do not think of them. Think only of your fire. Let it gather. Let it flow. Trust yourself. The hatchling closed its eyes for a moment. It breathed in deeply, the guiding band across its chest glowing brighter as the energy pulled together. When it opened its mouth, a stream of flame shot forth. It struck the pillar, leaving black marks across the stone. The crowd gasped. Some cheered, others muttered in disbelief. The flame was real, stronger than most had expected. Yet Emperor Tsar's face remained stern. Again, he commanded. The hatchling obeyed. This time the flame came longer, brighter, burning across the pillar until smoke rose into the air. The courtiers leaned forward in shock. Many had laughed at the hatchling's weakness, yet here it stood, fire spilling from its throat. Still the emperor was not satisfied. He signaled for the guards to bring forward a larger trial. They rolled a massive block of iron into the arena, its surface dark and unyielding. Few dragons of such young age could mark it. Tsar's eyes glinted with cold challenge. If you are truly of my blood, show me now. The hatchling shivered, doubt flooding its heart. The iron block seemed impossible. Its wings drooped, and smoke trickled weakly from its mouth. The crowd began to murmur again, voices of scorn rising louder. Tamash knelt beside the dragon. His voice was calm, almost like a whisper against the storm. Do not fear the iron. It is only another stone. You have strength. It is inside you. Remember what we practiced. Gather it. Focus it. Trust your flame. The hatchling stared at him, eyes wide. Then it drew in a breath deeper than any before. The crystal band glowed, the hum within its chest growing louder, steadier. With a roar that echoed across the arena, the hatchling released its fire. A great stream of flame burst forth, brighter and hotter than ever before. It struck the iron block, wrapping around it, forcing heat into the unyielding surface. The metal glowed red, then orange, and finally cracked with a loud sound. The block split, its surface melting under the power of the flame. The arena erupted. Nobles cried out in shock, commoners shouted with awe, and even the guards could not hide their amazement. The hatchling staggered, panting, but lifted its head proudly. Its eyes shone with strength, and its wings spread wide. For the first time, Emperor Tsar stood from his seat. His gaze fixed on the dragon, unblinking. The silence that followed was heavier than the roar of the crowd. Slowly, he raised his hand. Enough. The fire died, the smoke cleared, and the hatchling lowered its head. Tamash rested a hand on its side, steadying it. The emperor stepped forward, his robe sweeping across the stone floor. He stopped before the hatchling, his towering figure casting a long shadow. For a long moment, he said nothing. The crowd held its breath. Then, at last, Tsar spoke. "You are not useless." His voice carried across the arena, sharp and heavy. "You are of my blood. You are worthy." The words struck like thunder. The courtiers bowed, some in shame, others in respect. The crowd roared with approval. For the first time, the hatchling was recognized by its own father, not as a failure, but as the heir it was meant to be. Tamash stepped back, his task complete. He did not seek glory, yet whispers spread through the arena. The human mechanic made this possible. Without him, the dragon would never have risen. Strange, how a human saw what none of us could. The emperor gave Tamash a long look. His pride would not let him speak thanks, but his silence carried weight. In that silence, Tamash understood. He had earned a place, not of rank or title, but of quiet respect. The hatchling curled its tail around Tamash, a gesture of trust. The crowd gasped again, for no dragon of the throne had ever shown such closeness to a human. Tamash only patted its side, calm as always. "Well done," he whispered. The trial ended, but its memory would live across the empire. The day the useless hatchling breathed fire strong enough to melt iron. The day a human mechanic revealed strength where none had believed it existed. The empire did not sleep the night after the trial. From the lowest servant to the highest noble, voices filled the halls with stories of what they had seen. The hatchling had breathed fire hot enough to melt iron, and the emperor himself had spoken words that no one expected. The one once called useless was now the heir of flame. In the quiet of his workshop, away from the noise of the palace, Tamash sat with the dragon. The hatchling rested beside him, wings folded but chest rising strong and steady. It had burned more power than ever before, yet it did not sag with weakness. Instead, it glowed with pride. Tamash polished one of the braces, checking every joint and hinge. He spoke softly while working. "You are growing fast. These will not fit you for long. Soon you will not need them." The dragon tilted its head, eyes watching him with curious warmth. Once, it had feared every hand that reached toward it. Now it lowered its neck so Tamash could adjust the straps with ease. Trust had grown where once there had only been doubt. News of the trial spread beyond the palace walls. Messengers carried word to distant provinces, to villages where people had whispered that the emperor's bloodline was broken. Now they spoke with awe. The hatchling has fire. The throne is strong again. But not all voices were filled with praise. In hidden chambers, nobles who had hoped to replace the emperor gritted their teeth. The dragon's strength had crushed their plans. Some called the human dangerous. Others spoke of removing him before he could guide the heir any further. Tomasz was not blind to the whispers. He had lived long enough to know envy when he saw it. Yet he did not change his way. Each morning he trained the hatchling in the courtyard. Balance, fire, and strength. Each night he repaired the braces and polished the guiding crystal. His focus remained on the dragon, not on the politics swirling around them. One day, as the sun lit the tower's gold, Emperor Tsar summoned Tomasz to his throne. The hall was wide and silent, lined with guards in black armor. The emperor sat tall, his gaze cold and searching. The hatchling lay curled beside the throne, watching with sharp eyes. "You are human," the emperor said, his voice deep. "You are not of my blood, nor of my people. Yet you have done what none of my kind achieved. Tell me, why?" Tomasz bowed slightly, his voice plain. "Because nothing is born useless. It only needs time, patience, and care. I saw strength where others saw failure. That is all." The emperor studied him in silence. Finally, he spoke. "You have given my heir what I could not. You may stay in this palace. You will have protection and respect. But know this. If your loyalty falters, I will end you myself." Tomasz met the emperor's eyes calmly. "I ask for nothing but the chance to continue my work. My loyalty is to the dragon who trusted me when no one else did." The hall remained quiet. Then, to the surprise of many courtiers, the emperor nodded once. It was not friendship, but it was recognition. From that day, Tomasz's place in the palace shifted. Servants greeted him with respect, guards no longer sneered, and nobles spoke his name with caution. Yet he kept to his workshop, never seeking gold or glory. All his care went to the growing hatchling. The bond between human and dragon deepened. The hatchling followed Tomasz through the halls, its claws clicking softly on stone floors. It slept near his door each night and woke eagerly at his call each morning. When it trained, its eyes always searched for Tomasz, as if drawing strength from his calm presence. Seasons passed, and the hatchling grew larger. Its wings stretched wider, its chest glowed brighter, and its flame grew hot enough to turn stone into glass. The braces that once supported its joints were no longer needed. Tomasz removed them one by one, smiling as the dragon walked without stumbling. "You have outgrown them," he said. "You are strong enough now to stand on your own." The dragon rumbled with pride, spreading its wings fully for the first time. The sight drew gasps from the courtyards, for it was no longer the small trembling creature it had been. It was becoming a true dragon of the throne. But strength brought new trials. One evening, raiders from the outer rim launched an attack, hoping to strike before the empire could rally. They burned villages and threatened the capital. The emperor called for defense, and the hatchling was summoned to its first real battle. The courtiers doubted again. "It is still too young," some said. "It will fail outside the palace walls." But Tomasz stood firm. "It is ready," he said. "Trust it." On the battlefield, under a sky heavy with smoke, the hatchling proved him right. With wings spread wide and fire pouring from its throat, it turned the tide of the fight. Raiders who had come with boldness fled in terror as the young dragon soared above them, its flame marking the ground with rivers of fire. Soldiers of the empire cheered, shouting the heir's name. When the battle ended, the hatchling returned with soot on its scales but no fear in its eyes. It landed beside Tamash, lowering its head proudly. Tamash placed his hand on its neck, his voice steady as always. "You did well." The emperor himself came forward, and though his pride was heavy, he placed a hand on the dragon's wing. "You are my heir," he said. The words rang across the army, silencing all doubt. From that day on, the hatchling was no longer seen as weak. It was the pride of the empire, the flame of the throne. And beside it, always, walked the human mechanic. The one who had seen value when others saw nothing. The one who had worked with patience instead of scorn. Years would pass, and songs would be sung of the emperor's dragon. Yet in every telling, one truth remained clear. The dragon's greatness was not born from royal blood alone. It was forged by the steady hand of a human who refused to call anything useless. In the quiet of the palace workshop, where the story had begun, Tamash often sat with the dragon, now taller than the towers. He polished his tools and smiled faintly. "You were never useless," he said. "You only needed someone to believe in you." The dragon lowered its massive head, eyes warm with trust. It rumbled softly, a sound that shook the walls but carried no threat. It was the sound of a bond stronger than flame, stronger than fear, stronger than pride. And so, in a palace of stone and fire, a human and a dragon stood together. Not master and servant, not ruler and subject, but companions who had changed the empire forever.